All right, folks. Happy Thursday. I had to make sure it was Thursday. Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Counter Media Podcast. Want to say hi to
Well, it is
everybody
Friday here.
there.
Sorry to interrupt.
It is Friday. No, I'm glad you interrupted to let me know it was Friday
Yeah.
there. I'm glad you
Yeah.
explained to me how time zones work in Australia.
Yeah. It's not the same time in every place on the planet. This is just informational
all be
part to
America
you and the rest of the audience.
Should all be America time.
It's only an executive order away, probably.
Exactly. The 52nd state. No big deal. Australia. Yeah, man. Make sure you guys like, subscribe. Make sure you guys are sharing this stuff. We really do appreciate it. Yeah. Want to say hi to everybody over there in the comments. We got Tommy Hager. He was first. MPCV. Miller Films. Who else? We got Metal Sear, Jeff Johnson, Jason TG sponsor, Con, Lori Matthews. Good to see you. Who else we got over there?
You see, Jeff's already commenting on my changing prison surroundings.
Yeah. Well, they had to redo the general population room there for the rec room for the inmates there. I'm just curious what you have to do to get it for, like 2 hours. I bet there's a lot of personal favors that go into play with that. But
no, there's none of that. Okay, we're just a very liberal country where we look after our prisoners. There's no need for any of these crass insinuations that are going on here.
Oh, by the way, Robert Cochran, Gary Shaver, Ted Boyette, Steve Schaefer, all you guys, hey, thanks for tuning in. We're going to have fun tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about this, a little bit about that, have some fun. We want to hear from you guys over in the comments. Make sure you guys are jumping in. And we do have a lot to cover. First of all, man, Trump just can't stop winning. I mean, just winning. Kash got confirmed. That was, I was just talking to Chris right before the show. The nominee that I was most concerned about was, oh gosh, I literally just Tulsi Gabbard. Anyways, so I'm glad she got confirmed, but of course, I thought Kash Patel was fair. There wasn't a whole lot to dissent against when it came to Kash Patel, who's highly qualified. Then of course RFK, man, he got everybody in, so I'm pretty stoked about that. Pete Hegseth, a lot going on in the news in the DOD. He's just kicking ass and taking names over there. I mean, just a lot of good stuff going on. And Trump
even saw a report about he was pushing for defense cuts in the military by a certain percent. I forget the exact number.
Yeah, and he's got a list of like generals he's getting ready to fire, all those things. So I'm loving it.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes.
I was just looking at the DOGE tracker, all the different stuff that they're cutting in DOGE. Number one is the USAID that got $5.23 billion saved. Department of Education, $501 billion. General Services, GSA, $197 million. Department of Ag, $173 million. Department of Homeland Security, $164 million. They are right now at the 2.75% of the $2 trillion goal. So $2 trillion they plan on cutting between yearly budgets and everything else. So we'll see how that all turns out. But yeah, we got a lot going on, and he's making headway faster than I thought, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I just noticed in the comments someone said, the viewership here will increase when Trump stops speaking. And fair enough, he's live speaking somewhere at the moment at the RGA dinner. He does seems to do 3 or 4 sort of big press conferences a day almost. So he's a busy guy. Never saw that much from Biden, that's for sure.
Harold, never forget Chris is here. He's always here, either in person or in spirit. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Chris, I know you wanted to talk about Ukraine. We got a lot going on with Ukraine. We got the freaking Zelensky, who is just, I think, is absolutely hilarious. I'll share this.
Yeah, he's not handling it too well, old Zelensky.
No, he's not handling it well at all. And
he doesn't seem to understand Trump very well.
No,
or what's going to work or what's going to be good for him. Because he's getting a little mouthy.
He's getting a little mouthy. He said,
Trump was in
Zelensky accused
disinformation
Trump
or
of
something.
perpetuating Russian disinformation. And this is one of the things that obviously they're cracking down, and well, we've even cracked down here in the U.S. in the recent past. But these little silly euphemisms that they've been using successfully, that's not going to work on Trump. Trump jabbed back at Zelensky, calling him a dictator who has failed the country and suggested Ukraine initiated the war. On top of that, and then down here, they talk about Zelensky having the audacity to say, nobody decides anything behind our back. Bro, you're not even allowed at the big boy table where we're negotiating your peace deal. You're not even allowed. And the media, the U.S. media in the Biden administration has pumped this idiot up so much, like he has ever had a control of anything. He's not even real. Ukraine's not even a real country at this point. You were provoked into this war by the U.S. government. You were handled by the U.S. government. And now there's a new U.S. government. And it's not the old one. And this war doesn't exist without the backing of the United States. And if you play around with Trump, he's going to pull funding. And the next thing you know, if you want to continue the war, you can, but it's going to be, you will have no munitions. You'll have no money. You'll have no food. You'll have no medical equipment. You will not be able to fight the war. And you've never been able to fight this proxy war that the U.S. government was fighting against Russia to begin with. You have been a pawn of the United States, and you better realize what's going on, because you're going to find yourself in a really bad spot. And that's where he's going to. Your only option at this point is peace. And I think it's hilarious that this guy thinks he's in charge of anything, because he's not. And I find the whole thing hilarious. This guy has gotten way too big for his britches. And
he's like he's believed his own sort of nonsense about Ukraine being a independent sovereign country, which is always just not a very realistic description of that country. They seem, especially since 2014, seem completely controlled by America. Now America's going a different way, and Ukraine wants to make out like it can decide these things, but they really can't. So Trump sent over that, was it Bessent, the Treasury Secretary?
Yeah.
I think we mentioned it in our last episode. And he was over there to get Zelensky to sign some sort of deal where the US would be reimbursed with Ukraine's rare earth minerals or whatever for the funding America's given, or the equipment Americans given and might give in the future. Apparently Zelensky didn't sign it. And we'll sort of go through that. Trump had a couple of angry Truth social posts about that meeting. So, basically America's the hand that feeds it. And, so I imagine Zelensky just saying no. I mean, it probably makes sense from a hypothetical independent sovereign country perspective, maybe not to sign it, but that's not the reality. The reality is you're backed by America. And if you want that backing to continue, you probably have to do what they say, which would be to sign the agreement. So Trump wasn't happy. He sent the Treasury Secretary supposedly to sign this agreement, and Trump seems to think it was sort of agreed to beforehand, but when it came down to it, he wouldn't sign it.
Well, and the other part of this too is as the left-wing media and the Biden administration has talked up democracy, it is ironic the fact that they've been Ukraine's been under martial law since February of 2022. They haven't had elections, and I guarantee you at this point. So right now, the Ukrainian government is fighting a war that really we have no idea how much the Ukrainians actually support it, and. I don't think that Zelensky would win an election right now. So he's running the country like a dictator, and there's no good ethical reason in the 21st century that we are now in to continue to put off elections, even if you are in the middle of a war, because that's during wartime is probably one of the best times to have an election, to see if the people of your country actually support what you're doing, think you're doing a good job, and want to continue this war that you're fighting without their input on it whatsoever.
Yeah, and they probably don't in Ukraine. There has been some footage. It's hard to corroborate all these kind of details or whatever, but there is conscription. People are being sort of rounded up that don't want to fight the war. Russia does it as well. They have some kind of conscription. But a lot of people in Ukraine are being thrown into the meat grinder against their will.
But Russia isn't running around talking about democracy every other word,
Yeah.
which Zelensky is, and that's the problem. And Jeff, I don't think this is actually true. They have a provision where they can institute martial law, but it doesn't mean that they can't still have elections. It does allow them to. Their constitution does allow that, but it doesn't mean that they can't have elections. So, once again, you're wrong. Just like we talked about in the text message chat today, Jeff, and yesterday. No big deal.
So I've got a little bit of, I'm trying to think which one to play first, because I forget all the order. There's been a couple of Truth Socials, a couple of meetings. Zelensky said this, Trump said that. So I might play a bit of this video. I think he said a couple of interesting things here. Bear with me.
While you're looking that up, Metal Steel, I know that even Trump is I doubt this is true, the 4% approval rating. I don't know where that actually came from. I know Zelensky actually said 54%. He was actually referencing a USAID poll that was, ran by USAID saying 54%. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I bet
somewhere in
it's
between.
I'm sure there's some people that still, you're going to have 20% support almost no matter what, because 20% of the people that he's paying off with corrupt, which, again, we're sending all this money over there. I'm sure there's millions, if not billions of dollars that are completely unaccounted for and are going into the coffers of people as opposed to going to what it's supposed to, just like we have here in the United States. And by the way, some of that money that's going to Ukraine is just going back in a circle back through old U.S. things like USAID and other institutions, and coming back here to the United States through the military industrial complex, and then getting pushed into Democrat, election coffers, and who knows, probably their back pockets too. We're in a cyclical corruption scandal that nobody's really talking about, and hopefully that gets more visibility on it, because I want some accountability for that money that's going over there. So hopefully DOGE just gets knee deep into that.
Yeah, so it's good to see Trump sort of getting a little bit pushing back against all this kind of stuff. I don't think you get that from any other U.S. president. So he's a little.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Real fast. Hey, real quick. So, Con, what you have to understand is that you don't see some of these things in the chat because we're also live streaming. I see a collective chat from X, Rumble. I don't know if Instagram shows up there, but also Facebook. So some of those things you guys won't see in the chat. You're only going to see what you see there on YouTube, but we're also streaming on some other platforms. So just to clarify that.
All righty.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the Russia talks, your impression of how they went today, and if you're perhaps more confident or less confident of a deal after what happened today?
Well, much more confident. They were very good. Russia wants to do something. They want to stop the savage barbarianism. I mean, what's going on over there?
Oh, because also there was that meeting in Saudi Arabia between Marco Rubio and I think Lavrov, and that Mike Waltz was there.
Yep.
And it seemed to go well. I don't think there was anything concrete there, but just a stepping stone to sort of negotiating. And it looks like it's all going pretty well. And of course, Ukraine, I think they might have had some kind of invite to be sort of around or whatever, but not in the actual meeting. But they didn't even want that. Zelensky said, "Oh well, no, I'm not even going. If not, I'm not booked for the main event." So Ukraine wasn't there.
Its soldiers are being killed by the thousands on a weekly basis. It's ridiculous. And they're not American soldiers. They're Russian soldiers, and they're Ukrainian soldiers largely, although a lot of Koreans have been killed, as you know. Quite a bit of them have been killed. They came over to fight, and a large portion have been wiped out. But we want to end it. It's a senseless war. It should have never happened, would have never happened if I was president. And it's a shame to see it. And I see pictures that you don't see, but I see pictures of fields that look just horrible. It looks like Gettysburg. If you see the old pictures of Gettysburg, it's soldiers lying all over the field, body parts all over the field. They're all dead. And this is going on a daily basis. It's a horrible thing. Both Russia and Ukraine, they're losing thousands and thousands of soldiers. And a lot of people have been killed, too. I think that's one of the things that you'll see historically, and you'll see later on as it goes along. I think people are going to be surprised at how many people, not only soldiers, have been killed in Ukraine. A lot more people than you think. Yeah, please.
President Trump, as part of a peace deal with Putin, would you be willing to consider removing all American troops from Europe?
Well, nobody's asked me to do that, so I don't think we'd have to do that. I wouldn't want to do that. But that question's never really come up.
Yeah, I don't think that's on the
Yeah,
cards.
No.
please.
Sir, do you support stationing European peacekeeping troops in Ukraine as part of this peace deal?
If they want to do that, that's great. I'm all for it. If they
I think
want to
so,
do
mentioned
that,
something like that.
I think that's
As part of a
that'd be
security
fine.
guarantee, have European.
I mean, I know
non-American
France
troops
has
there
mentioned it. Others have mentioned it.
on the
UK has mentioned it, but yeah, if we have a peace deal, I think having troops over there from the standpoint of Europe, we won't have to put any over there because, we're very far away. But having troops over there would be fine. I would not object to it at all. We're talking about this now, peace. We have either a ceasefire or a peace itself, and we're looking to do both. We'd start off with the ceasefire, and if they want to do that. I know France was willing to do that, and I thought that was a beautiful gesture. Yeah, please.
Do you have any message for Ukrainians who, after 3 years of fighting, might feel betrayed or disappointed at not having a seat at these initial talks in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think I'm really disappointed in what's happened. I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president, and I've been watching these people being killed at levels that you've rarely seen, not even close, since the Second World War. And I'm very disappointed. I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives, and without the loss of cities that are just laying on their sides. You have those magnificent golden domes that are shattered, will never be replaced. You can't replace them. 1,000-year-old domes that are so beautiful, you can't replace that. The whole civilization has changed because of what. So when they're worried about not being seated, you mean somebody that should have gone in and made a deal a long time ago. You could have made a deal. This is one that could have made a deal. There was no talk of this during the Trump administration. Putin would have never, ever done it. And by the way, we wouldn't have had October 7th. You know that. We wouldn't have had October 7th either in Israel. And we wouldn't have had that mess that's going on over there. It's like we have great fire people here. We're putting out fires. All over the world, we're putting out fires. So that wouldn't have happened. And you know what else wouldn't have happened? Inflation. Because it was caused really by the cost of energy going through the roof because of their bad energy policies and also their spending, their terrible spending, wasteful spending on the Green New Scam. It's a scam. It's a whole big scam. Yep.
We're hearing that Russia wants to force Ukraine to hold new elections in order to sign any kind of a peace deal. Is that something that the U.S. would ever support?
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, or essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating, and where a country has been blown to smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on their sides. The buildings are collapsed. It looks like a massive demolition site. So many of the cities. I mean, they haven't done it in Kiev because I guess they don't want to shoot too many rockets in there. They've done it 20%, but they haven't done it 100%. If they wanted to do it 100%, it would probably happen very quickly. But you have cities that are absolutely decimated. And yeah, I would say that, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, it's been a long time since we've had an election. That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also. Ukraine is being just wiped out. Look at what's happening to the cities. There are cities, there's not even a building standing. It's a massive, you talk about Gaza. I mean, it's literally, these cities look like Gaza. Actually, many have, percentage-wise, more buildings knocked down than in Gaza. So, people are tired of it. People want to see something happen. And, the other thing that it's been bothering me for a long time, because I solved the problem with NATO. They paid hundreds of billions of dollars into the funds of NATO when I said, you got to pay, because the United States was paying for European countries, and then they take advantage of us on trade. But I've seen it. Look, we have to They have to pay. They have to find out where is the money going to. We have, I believe, President Zelensky said last week that he doesn't know where half of the money is that we gave him. Well, we gave them, I believe, $350 billion, but let's say it's something less than that, but it's a lot. And we have to equalize with Europe because Europe has given us given a very much smaller percentage than that. I think Europe has given 100 billion, and we've given, let's say, 300 plus. And it's more important for them than it is for us. We have an ocean in between, and they don't. But where is all the money that's been given? Where is it going? And nobody, I've never seen an accounting of it. We give hundreds of billions of dollars. I don't see any accounting. So I want to see peace. Look, you know why I want? Because I don't want all these people killed anymore. I'm looking at people that are being killed, and they're Russian and Ukrainian people, but they're people. Doesn't matter where they're from on the whole planet. And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. What he was so bad for this. He was so bad, so pathetic, so sad. But with all of that being said, look, it is what it is.
To be fair,
when I left, there was no chance that this could have happened. But it happened because we had incompetent leadership at many different levels. But when you see what's taken place in Ukraine with millions of people killed, including the soldiers, millions of people killed, a big percentage of their cities knocked down to the ground. I don't know how anybody even lives there. You know, when they say they took a poll and Zelensky's at 4%, who's living there? You know, I mean, it's hard to believe that people live there. Their cities are being knocked down. And this is something that would have never happened. And by the way, for 4 years, it didn't happen. It was never going to happen. Go ahead.
One follow-up question. How would you counter the perception, because Russia's pushing for this, obviously, they don't really hold true elections, that would be a capitulation of some sort. How would you guard against potentially Russia installing a puppet government? And then finally, how would that new election have an impact on getting Zelensky to sign the rare earth minerals deal?
Look, you have leadership, and I like him personally. He's fine. But I don't care about personally. I care about getting the job done. You have leadership now that's allowed a war to go on that should have never even happened, even without the United States. Look, we had a president who was grossly incompetent. He had no idea what he was doing. He said some very stupid things, like going in for portions and all of the things. He made a lot of bad statements, but he's grossly incompetent, and I think everyone knew that. This is something that should have never happened, would have never happened. And I used to discuss it with Putin. President Putin and I would talk about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye, I will tell you that. But there was never a chance of him going in. And I told him, you better not go in. Don't go in. Don't go in. And he understood that. He understood it fully. But I'm only interested, I want to see if I can save maybe millions of lives. This could even end up in a World War III. I mean, to be honest with you, you've been hearing now Europe is saying, well, I think we're going to go in and we're going to go. All of a sudden, you're going to end up in World War III over something that should have never happened. And, you know, it's a very sad situation. Yeah, please.
In a court fight.
I think that's true too. There was sort of an early deal. They're talking with Turkey, I think, to set it up, and it's hard to know the exact details, but it does seem like Boris Johnson went over there basically to say to Zelensky, "Don't sign anything. We'll have you back. Just keep fighting. Don't worry about a deal." And I assume the deal would have been better than whatever deal Ukraine's going to get now after all this fighting and all that kind of stuff. What else have we got here? Oh, yeah, so Trump, you know, he gets on Truth Social. He's probably reacted to some news of Zelensky sort of trashed him a little bit. He just gets on there and says, think of it, a modestly successful comedian, Vladimir Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the US and Trump, will never be able to settle. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe. It's funny, he's kind of got the dollars twice. It's just a small thing. He's got the dollars and then he says dollars again. Anyway, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the United States will get nothing back. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization in that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us? We have a big, beautiful ocean as separation. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent him is missing. He refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. A dictator without elections, Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions have unnecessarily died, and so it continues. I always get the feeling Trump sort of exaggerates the numbers a little bit. I think when it first sort of started, in 22, he came out pretty much straight away and said there's been hundreds of thousands of dead people killed. I'm like, already? Really? I mean, maybe we'll find out when the dust settles or whatever. But yeah, long story short, I guess Trump is not happy with Zelensky. And what else have I got? Got a couple of more videos from Trump. I got one from Putin, got one from Lavrov. Let's mix that with a bit of Putin, shall we? I haven't actually watched this one yet, but Putin usually makes sense.
Договорились возобновить в нормальном режиме работу дипломатических ведомств. Постоянное выдворение дипломатов из Вашингтона и из Москвы ни к чему хорошему не приводит. У нас, если так дело дальше пойдет, в этих зданиях будут работать только одни уборщицы.
Because I guess they're talking about fixing diplomatic relations and probably putting ambassadors back in buildings. Because I guess a whole bunch of them were kicked out after the Skripal poisoning. There's people in England that were poisoned supposedly by Russian Novichok. That's a whole other story. I don't know the truth there. Because they did make Novichok in a lab in England right next to where they died, these two. Oh, no, they didn't die, did they? I can't remember. Anyway, after this poisoning, America kicked out a bunch of Russian ambassadors and Russia returned the favour, basically. And I guess that, and maybe even sanctions, are sort of are going to be worked out between America and Russia. It seems like they're going pretty well. Trump obviously seems pretty favourable of Putin and not so much with Zelensky.
Yeah.
Труп тоже.
Oh, what were you saying?
No, I was just going to say, so I'm researching this ban on election thing. I'm just trying to make sure I got my ducks in a row here. So I know, Chuck, I know you said, and Jeff also has talked about that martial law requires no elections during the war. This isn't true. What it requires is a ban on the parliamentary elections. It does not include, and I just found a quote earlier on another thing that was one of the drafters of the Constitution, that does not apply to the actual president himself. They can opt to do that. This article is from the Journal of Democracy. It's from 2024. It says, under normal circumstances, Ukraine would have had elections by now for parliament last fall and president this past spring. But because of Russia's ongoing war of aggression, the country hasn't held elections since 2019. It continues to go on. It does talk about, in this particular, it does talk about the parliamentary, they wouldn't have parliamentary elections. But then it goes on to talk about they were planning on actually having presidential elections. A year ago, some government thought it might be possible to hold the presidential elections despite the war, not least because the president would have won easily. And it goes on. Ultimately, the government chose not to hold elections, a decision that was in line with both recommendations of local elections focused NGOs, i.e. USAID, and Ukrainians' public opinion. They go on to say, basically it would be a challenge to hold elections during the war, but also like 84% of Ukrainians supported the president and opposed holding the presidential election. So it was basically what they were saying was that it was pointless. But the ban on elections does not, through several documents that I've just went through, doesn't technically ban the election process for the president, only for Parliament itself. So just so that we're clear on that, and you can make a good argument, I guess, for not having a presidential election during a war. I do think that it definitely has a logistics challenge, to say the least, but at the same time, we just need to be crystal clear that it doesn't necessarily, their constitution doesn't ban the presidential election from taking place. So he could have.
Sure, if they wanted to have really wanted to have an election, they could. Like they could, it's not like it's just, oh, we'd love to have an election, but just unfortunately our hands are tied and we can't. I mean, there are arguments, I suppose, about, I don't know how it usually works in wartime with elections and that, but like we get comments here, how do you have elections when 20% of Ukraine is occupied? Pretty much the last two elections have been while Ukraine was occupied. After the 2014 coup, and there was sort of the separatist sort of movement, and Crimea was annexed, they had their sort of first election after that where they elected Poroshenko. But like a good chunk of the country was occupied then. And then, it stayed occupied ever since. So even when Zelensky was elected, Ukraine didn't control that part of Ukraine, and that part of Ukraine didn't vote. I understand it's a lot worse now with the war escalating, with Russia actually fully invading. But it's just a question of what do the Ukrainian people think of Zelensky? I don't think we really know.
Just so we're clear, we thought that was awesome there, Wowza. And what you're going to do is you're going to be banned now. So let's go ahead and ban Wowza and delete your comments, because you can't talk to people with any, modicum of respect. So you're gone.
I think I missed that, but it sounds like I wasn't missing much from whoever that was.
No, Chuck, what I'm saying, again, you can make an argument that it doesn't make sense to have an election, but what you can't say is that the government is banned from having elections because they were planning on having elections. That's all I'm saying. I don't care where you fall on that. I'm just saying that this has been said a lot in the media. It was something I looked up several weeks ago. And again, I just wanted to look it up again to make sure that I had my facts straight. They could technically hold elections. They were planning on holding elections even in 2023 when, again, they could have done that. But they decided not to, not because they were talking about necessarily major logistics issues. They basically said, hey, it would be a waste of time because we have so much support and he would be reelected, so it would be a waste of time on top of the logistics issue. But I mean, I think you can have elections. And again, I stand by the idea that during a war, it's probably a good time to see how the people, the citizens of said country, are supporting that war and where they fall. I don't trust any of these poll numbers that come out of there. I don't trust any poll number that comes out of Ukraine. I don't trust that the Ukrainian government. First of all, let's get that on the table right now. I think that the Ukrainian government is absolutely corrupt. I think any information that gets put out by the Ukrainian government is corrupt. I think most of the information that we received through USAID and our Department of State that have come through out of Ukraine is bad information. It's misinformation that we're getting as well. So I think the problem is that we have a real issue with the fidelity of information that we're getting out there. Yes, there is Russian disinformation, but guess what? There's a whole hell of a lot of Ukrainian disinformation too, and they are incentivized by the billions of dollars that we're sending to Ukraine. And yeah, some of that's going to a war effort, but I also know that billions of dollars are also getting squandered and it's getting lapped up by dirty politicians and by other folks and by even Americans that are taking advantage of this situation without a doubt. So, I mean, it is what it is. That's how I feel about it.
And Harold here says, wasn't Zelensky into movie acting before he was president? Yes, he was. He was even actually one of his roles was, he might have even been playing a Ukrainian actor, I'm not sure about that part, who became president. It's called Servant of the People. It was actually funded by one of the oligarchs over there, I think, Kolomoisky. He was a big steel oligarch. And I think I read that he funded the production of that show as well. Not 100% sure on that part.
And, I don't even care about all these conspiracies or, the fact that he's an actor or whatever else. The principle that's in play here for me the most is the fact that we are not, it is not our job to defend another country that is not part of NATO. We haven't agreed to do that. We have no obligation whatsoever to fend off the evil that is Russia. I don't even believe it's really in our interest. Now, again, if they start stepping into NATO, we have obligations there. But our job, look, if you're a country and you can't defend yourself, you can't pay for yourself, you can't exist without foreign aid, And by the way, I'm a huge pro-Israel guy, right? I feel the same thing about Israel. If you can't defend your own damn country, then you don't get to exist. We, the United States, we have went through civil wars. We went through a revolution. We were self-determining our destiny as a country, and we made it possible. And guess what? If the Ukrainians want to fend off the Russians and they want to take back every piece of land, then let them do it. And if other countries want to help, great. But we are not obligated to do so. And I'm tired of like this default thing where like we have to do something. No, we don't. No, we don't. Let that country be their own goddamn country. Like, quit thinking that we need to freaking step in and mitigate and police the world. Like, we already know that like there's a better argument for going to Iraq and Afghanistan than there is going into freaking Ukraine. And we know that those were freaking boondoggles. We have tens of thousands of Americans dead. We have tens of thousands more that have died from suicide and other problems since then. And yet we still don't ever learn a lesson. And the American people, we throw up a little bit of stuff of like, oh, Russia's scary. Oh, and then the American people are like, oh, I've learned nothing over the last 20 years. You're right. Let's just send money and people over there. We're like freaking clapping seals because we think this is a good idea. It's absolutely retarded, folks. Like, let those countries defend themselves.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, even as, I think it was Team America, the movie, by the South by guys. But I was going to say, America sort of has to decide what it is. Is it the world empire? Is it going to like spread democracy everywhere? Is it going to be the world police and fight everyone's battles? Or is it going to sort of pull in a little bit and just be more America first and sort of just look after your own little sphere of influence? And I think that'd be the better way to go. Because if you want to sort of be, look, we're number one, we're America, we're going to rule the world, I think that sort of comes with it maybe. Or you can still be like a world leader without intervening everywhere. But there is a bit of overlap.
Yeah, like we've gotten ourselves in too much trouble. And the other part is we've made it so profitable for politicians and huge defense corporations. We've made conflict profitable, and that's the problem with this. And Chuck, France was completely, that was on them, and who knows what other agreements that we came up with between France, like you help us, like what is it? Like, France didn't just help us because they were just good-hearted people and they wanted to do whatever. Well, maybe they did, and that's their prerogative to do that. But the fact is like we don't have an obligation in the same way that France didn't have an obligation with us. Like, we went to war with France as well. So people go back and forth. We have no, like, what are we getting out of Ukraine? I would even buy it if the thing that people accuse the United States of actually doing, if we did this, for instance, we're like, hey, we'll help you, Ukraine. You're going to pay us back. And by the way, we own like 20% of all of your mineral rights or something like that. Like, we need something in it for us, as opposed to just giving blood and treasure away like it doesn't cost anything. It's easy to give things away when it doesn't cost you anything, and that's what the politicians of the United States have done for the last almost 100 years, by the way. And that's why we've been in so many wars and conflicts that we should have never been in to begin with, because it's so easy to be good-hearted and generous with shit and people that aren't yours. Like, you give away like, let's be giving away my neighbor's kids to this problem, or giving away my neighbor's money for this. Like, I'm done with it, man. I'm done with these wars that make zero sense.
Yeah, and imagine if people had more of a direct say in it. Like, I mean, I know it's not practical, but if you polled every single American and just said, do you want your taxes to go to Ukraine or not? I imagine most people would say not.
Yeah.
But politicians can just speak for all of them. Actually, I think I've got a clip in one of my, I mentioned last week, I got my Ukraine series, 8 months in Ukraine, and Joe Biden goes over there in 2014 and he's speaking to, I don't even think they had any elections yet, so he was just speaking to various Ukrainian politicians. They didn't even have a leader. Biden was basically the leader at that point, and his son moved in. And he basically said something like, oh, I support you, and I say the American people support you. And even at the time, I'm like, I don't think the American people are even really following this too closely back then, when he's saying we will back the Ukrainian army in its war against the so-called separatists.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking then, who's he to say, oh, the American people stand with you? It's like, do they? I don't think that.
Hey, and Chuck, by the way, folks, Chuck is somebody I know, and I want to make sure that I am venting my frustration at the system. And Chuck, I appreciate and respect your opinions on this. Clearly, we differ, and that's okay. But I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not going high and right on you, Chuck. I'm just saying this is how I see it, and my frustration is with the U.S. government. None of that vitriol is directed at you, and I just want to make sure that's clear. And that goes with anybody out there. If I start going off on a tangent, unless I direct it at you, and I'm like, J-Rock, you suck, and you're an idiot. And of course, I don't think that. But again, you guys know that I've went high and right on some people out there, and I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah, and we do appreciate all the.
I am Chuck, and to be clear, I'm very principled on this. I'm pretty open to the idea of pulling U.S. troops out of most places. Like, here's the problem too: the amount of U.S. troops that we have in Israel is not that many. It's not going to do much. We basically have enough troops there essentially to protect the embassies and consulates. So, I think those that are there are fine. But, my problem is the amount of money that we send. And I love Israel. I believe that we need to support Israel. I think generally speaking, we send too much money to Israel. And this goes back to the issue. I'm all about giving all our money away if we weren't $36 trillion in debt. That's part of that. Once we get $36 trillion in debt gone, and we get rid of some of the problems that we have here in the United States, like, I don't know, let's get Maui rebuilt. Let's get the Carolinas taken care of. Let's get what is it? Palestine, Ohio, or is that right? I feel like that's the Ohio where they had the train wreck. Like, all that stuff is still going on, and we haven't taken care of our own people, and yet we're so compelled to take care of everybody else in the world. And it drives me absolutely crazy. And like, I'm fine with everybody being so passionate to help all these other people around the globe, but let's direct that passion first and take care of the people here in the United States, before we worry about all that nonsense. That's kind of where I'm at in all this.
Yeah, just before I go back to the Putin thing, I have to address the elephant in the room here. Jeff's getting a bit worked up with the conspiracy theories. He was saying maybe there's some ice. I forget exactly what. He's coming up with all kinds of theories, okay? Really, I'm just mucking around with the indoor lighting, okay? I've got some LED lights. Normally have the outdoor lighting. And sometimes even just the heat coming through gets a little bit too hot. So I'm just experimenting. Maybe next week it'll be open. You'll have to tune in every week to see whether this is up or down, whether there's any shenanigans going on in the background. But just had to update on the important stuff there before we get back to this whole Ukraine business, which isn't as important as my curtain and lighting.
Безусловно, надо ценить, но это не то, ради чего создаются дипломатические представительства. Это первое. Да, и, извините, и в целом, как мы докладывали, она была очень доброжелательна. Как мне сказали наши участники, это совсем с американской стороны были совсем другие люди, которые были открыты для переговорного процесса, без всякой предвзятости, без всяких осуждений того, что было сделано в прошлом. Во всяком случае, в двухсторонних контактах этого ничего не было, но настроены на совместную работу, открытые для совместной. Сделали первый шаг для того, чтобы возобновить работу по самым разным направлениям, которые представляют взаимный интерес. Это и Ближний Восток в широком смысле этого слова, имея в виду и присутствие до сих пор наше в Сирии, палестино-израильское урегулирование, и так далее. Там очень много вопросов, в решение которых вовлечены и Соединенные Штаты, и Российская Федерация, несмотря на то, что, конечно, первостепенное значение мы уделяем ситуации, связанной с украинским направлением. Но у нас есть и другие вопросы, и экономика, и наша совместная работа на мировых энергетических рынках. Поэтому в целом Вот, да, космос, конечно. Ведь, несмотря на все проблемы предыдущих 3 лет, у нас же продолжается работа в космосе. И на МКС
Sorry, Ukraine,
работают
we got to work together
как
in space.
американские астронавты,
Okay.
так и российские космонавты. Работа-то продолжается, и перспективы есть хорошие. Все вот это было предметом обсуждения, предметом рассмотрения на встрече в Рио. Оценка положительная. Что касается переговорного процесса, то мне в ходе телефонного разговора президент Трамп сказал, могу это подтвердить, что, конечно, Соединенные Штаты исходят из того, что переговорный процесс будет происходить при участии и России, и Украины. Никто Украину из этого процесса не исключил. Поэтому нет оснований для такой реакции на российско-американскую встречу. Трампа в свое время обвиняли в том, что он имеет какие-то особые отношения с Россией, и что Россия вмешивалась в выборы, когда он победил в прошлом своем периоде президентства. Создали команду, по судам его затаскали, создали даже специальную комиссию в Конгрессе. Ничего не подтвердилось. И не могло подтвердиться, потому что этого никогда не было. А вот что мы сейчас видели в ходе этой предвыборной кампании? Ну, все европейские лидеры, все без исключения, фактически напрямую вмешивались в избирательный процесс в США. Дело дошло до прямых оскорблений одного из кандидатов. Мы со своей стороны, конечно, было ясно, кому мы симпатизируем, но мы не позволяли себе вмешиваться, и уж тем более не позволяли никаких резких заявлений и оскорбительных выпадов в отношении кого бы то ни было из кандидатов. Мы этого просто не делали, а европейцы делали. Но я вообще, честно говоря, удивляюсь сдержанности.
All right, so look,
Yeah.
this is utter bullshit. Like we know, just look, we meddle in Russia. Russia meddles in our elections. Let's not let that slide. And generally speaking, Putin is going to be lying almost every time because we have so much overlap as far as look, we are, you know, we're essentially enemies, or at least something along those lines. There's no doubt about that. To me, that is very, very clear. But at the same time, I think the United States government has pushed and provoked Russia when they did not need to, because what I think is that we have a lot of DOD, we have a lot of our intel structure, the intel community in the IC in general have built themselves up around an adversary, specifically Russia. They need Russia to exist. So the idea that we're ever going to have peace with them, with a lot of the people that are in play in both our diplomat and the intelligence community, I don't think is possible, because they need Russia, the boogeyman, to justify a lot of the things they do. I also want to address this real quick. Matt Kay said, "This is America. We can," and he's talking about when I was saying that we shouldn't be helping everybody else outside of until we get our own affairs straight. And he said, "This is America. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can help ourselves and those we choose to." Not saying we should or shouldn't be helping others. Just not a fan of that argument. There's a couple of problems that I see fundamentally wrong with that statement, Matt. Is number one is that would be great, but when's the last time have we had a choice in who we help as we the American people? Half of this stuff is happening behind closed doors. We don't even know about it. All these things that we're now finding out that came out from DOGE is only because DOGE, like everything that happened during the Trump administration, Biden administration, Obama, George Bush, and everything else, all the back deal and all the billions of dollars getting sent out doing God knows what under, with no real assisting or money spent in the interest of the United States taxpayers. That's a fact. So that's a problem that I have with that, is we don't actually have a choice in any of this stuff. So that's the problem I have with it. The other part of this is like your entire argument would require us to believe that we, the United States of America, do anything well. Like we quit doing stuff good a really long time ago. Like, we don't fight wars well. We don't do diplomacy well. We don't do healthcare well. We don't do elections well in the United States. Like, we kind of have gotten to a point because of incompetence and leadership that we kind of suck at everything. I mean, we really do. It's really a shame for me to feel that way, but I think that's just obvious on its face at this point. We don't do anything well. And the other problem is that we have a government, especially under the Biden administration, but even going back as far as you want, doing all of these things behind Americans' back that we don't know about. And we don't have a democracy. And this country is not a democracy. I don't want to get into that debate, but we're supposed to have, if we don't have the information that all the information or enough information to make good decisions at the ballot box, then it's all for pretend. Like, they can put out any information they want, they can withhold any information they want, and we, the American people, don't have the information at that point to even make a good decision. So any even semblance of, we do have a republic that elects leaders through a democratic process, right? So, that's the problem I see with that. Like, we don't take care of our own people, and we just don't do anything well. So we shouldn't be doing other things not well in other countries. That's the problem with it. Like, none of this stuff, the stuff that we're doing in the United States isn't furthering the will of the people, for one. Number two, it's not furthering our own prosperity here in the United States. So all we're doing is now we're taking more money out of the United States, and we're doing the same shit overseas. It doesn't make sense to me. So that's the problem that I have with all this, is like, we haven't had competent leaders in a really long time. We don't fight wars well. That's like, we could have won Iraq. We could have won Vietnam. We could have won Afghanistan in a very short amount of time, but we decided to drag it out for monetary gain. And then while we pretend to sort of fight a war and not, it's just like half-ass shit all the way around.
And I think even part of the imperative to sort of America to sort of meddle in Ukraine about a decade ago, they sort of have in various ways since the fall of the Soviet Union, but that's Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was an advisor to presidents all the way back from Carter to Obama. He wrote his book, The Grand Chessboard, in the 90s, and I think a lot of US politicians have sort of followed his worldview. And his idea of maintaining American primacy in the next century, it talked about you basically need to pull Ukraine out of Russia's orbit. So that's what we have to do. And I think that's sort of what's happened over the last decade. Well, things have changed in the last couple of years, but there was a push to get Ukraine out of Russia's orbit, get rid of the custom, don't do the deal with Russia, but do the association agreement with the EU, which is sort of a stepping stone into NATO. So part of the motive for this was for America's benefit, that it sort of just hasn't worked. And I think, as you said, you've got incompetent people sort of running these things, and things backfire. So with Ukraine, you've just got a lot of dead people, and Russia's, after all these years, survived all these sanctions. It's about to be brought in from out of the cold or whatever. Russia and China are a lot closer together. So even when people are trying to, better American interests, which is, I think, what was some of the motives of sort of the coup, or whatever you want to call it, in Ukraine, and supporting an anti-Russian government, they don't, they backfire, even if you accept that that's the right thing to do, which I don't anyway. But even if you accept this sort of US empire, we need to control this, we need to control that, they're not quite capable of doing it. And I think it's better just to withdraw a bit.
No, I agree. Like we're doing things so terribly all around. Like, we got to stop doing so many things that hurt us. And that's the thing. Like, we create this initiative, and politicians sell it to the American people. Like, we got to do this because it's good for us. And then it never is. It never is. So I want to address this, because I think this comment right here kind of is the underlining thing that I go by, and I think is a misnomer in itself. So it's your first great comment all night, Jeff. I just want to put that out there. But number two, I still disagree with
Jeff.
Yeah, great job.
Good comment.
It's not that we lack the political will to finish a war. I guess in the sense of, the way that I used to think about this in Iraq and Afghanistan, like, hey, we're not winning because we're trying to do diplomacy at the same time that we're fighting a war. And that doesn't ever work out, right? Like you fight a war, you freaking destroy everything, you win, and then you send diplomats in there and you clean it up, you mend ties between us and that country or whatever else. That's how we've always, well, that's how we did it in World War II, World War I, and so on. And those are the last real wars that we won. But I disagree with that now. I think the fact is that what we're seeing is engineered on its face. It's not that we don't have the political will to fight. It's that there's more money to be made through the military industrial complex and through other political means to just stay there. And yeah, it's going to cost a few thousand American lives. And that's the thing that disgusts me, is they know these tactics and what they're doing is going to cost American lives, but they don't care. And that's, we talk about how Russia thinks that their people are disposable. Well, you know what? I kind of get the same vibe from our own country, given our track record. Maybe not as bad. And here's the thing. I don't even think it's necessarily that they don't think that the American people are as disposable as the Russians think their people are. I think that they know that we'll eventually rise up, either politically or some other way, and say, no, this is enough. Like if we were doing with U.S. troops what Russia is doing right now with Russian troops, throwing people at the Ukraine war like they're disposable as bullets themselves, like the American people would rise up. And that's the calculus that they're always under is like, hey, we're gonna push this as far as we can go to get the most amount of bang for the buck or juice out of the squeeze, up to the point that America is going to have at the minimum a political revolution, which is what we saw with Donald Trump, especially in this last election. So that's my problem with that statement too. We do have the political will to fight. The problem is that it's engineered not to win. And that's my issue with it.
Yeah, makes sense. I got a bit more Trump. Whinging about Ukraine, which is always good to see. Where are we?
Putin and President Zelensky and our teams began a ceasefire in Gaza, and we're bringing in the hostages and we're bringing them home to their families. Some of them are in pretty bad shape, I have to tell you. To end the horrible war in Ukraine, I've spoken with President Putin and President Zelensky, and our teams began negotiations this week in Saudi Arabia. I want to thank Saudi Arabia for that. That was so great. Yeah.
Just gonna say a side point. Enemy of the Gates, that movie of the snipers, the Russian and the Nazi snipers. Yeah, I also remember there's a video game, I think one of the Call of Duties or Medal of Honor or something. The opening scene is the Battle of Stalingrad, and you're with the Russian ships. Some people are trying to jump off the ship, and the guy's like shooting them all for deserting. And then you line up one by, the person in front of you will get the gun. You might get a bullet. And I don't know how much of that was Hollywood kind of stuff or whatever. But yeah, in that video game, you basically had to wait for someone else to die to get their gun and take it from them. That's exactly what I'll do, Jeff. It's either Call of Duty.
I hit that.
No, you're right.
No, I just wanted to
video game references. But they're all good.
Matt was saying part of the challenge lies with our government. Is structured every 48 years. One side comes and reverses everything the previous 48 years. How much what Trump is doing now is going to stick. So here's a little bit of a problem that I have with that. Going back until Trump, like we didn't really have any sort of major contrast of what works and what doesn't, because we had Bush come in. And did we really notice a big difference when Obama took over? Did things change a lot? Not really. And even really Obama to Trump, there wasn't a big dichotomy. There wasn't a big effectual change, because it is status quo with minor changes here and there. And I think this administration is the first to get out there and show what could and should be done. And what I would like to think is that at the end of this, if they continue on the path that they are, like Americans for the first time will actually have a clear choice. Hey, do you want to continue down this road where we're actually cleaning up government and draining the swamp, which is what Trump is doing and what we expected him to do the first election, his first term in office? And that's been the problem, is that we really have had a uniparty, and over the last, I don't know, at least since Reagan, where there's not been a clear choice between the two. Yeah, and there was only minor differences, and we see that with the outgoing of people like Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell. Thank God that jackass is leaving. I'm so sick of these people that pretend to be, fighting the Democrats and fighting all this stuff when in reality they're not.
Actually, I remember one of my first political red pills was probably about 20 years ago with Rage Against the Machine. They got that song "Testify." I think it was actually Michael Moore. He's obviously a big lefty or whatever, but he directed the video, and it was basically around the 2000 election, and the whole music video was basically just George Bush and Al Gore, was it? Just saying the same things from the campaign trail. So the whole thing was just this cool song, cool rap, rock, metal, whatever you want to call Rage Against the Machine, cool song, and just a cool video with just showing how George Bush and Al Gore basically were pretty much the same. And this is when I was first starting to get into politics, maybe around.
Think about it. Right now, with all the campaign promises that even Obama was making in 2007 and when he first got in office in 2008. He's saying many of the same things that what would be considered a radical Republican. And this, like, hey, marriage is between a man and a woman. That went on to 2011. He was saying that immigration has to change. Like, we have to close the border. Hillary and all of them were saying that. So, like, they've all been on the same sheet of music with a slightly different key, right? One was singing the same song in key of G, and the other one was key of C. And it was just shades of the same color. That's it. And now we're seeing what can and should have been done a long time ago.
Yeah. Jason, I sort of get you here. It's one of those bands, you kind of always knew that they were sort of socialists or whatever. When I was younger, I wasn't as opposed to that or whatever. But as time goes on, they keep whinging about whatever the sort of lefty whinge is at the time. It's like, oh man, I used to think these guys were cool, but yeah. A lot of whining, or whinging, as we say here in Australia.
Whinging? Anyway. You say whinging?
Whinging,
I lose more respect for Australians every day.
See, I'm going to have to call you on that one. You already knew that information. You already knew whinging was a thing.
The more I know about the Australian culture, I hate it even more.
But see, you already know. We've already discussed the word whinging. So this is all a little bit performative on your part. As if, they've just heard this new thing which has made you lost respect for Australia. This is, that loss of respect already happened whenever we talked about whinging a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
Reagan worship.
No, Gary.
Okay. So first of all, there was a big difference at the time during the 80s between Reagan and the Democrats. The Democrats in the 80s were fawning over Soviet Russia while Reagan was doing what was needed to actually end Soviet Russia. So yeah, he did some. I have some real major issues with Reagan when it comes to gun control. We have the GCA that he that threw into play in 1986. There's lots of issues that I have with Reagan, but my point is that it's been since Reagan that there was a clear choice between the two parties. That's my point.
Back a bit more, Trump.
And I want to thank, in particular, we have so many of the people, Yasser, Mohammed, all of the people, but in particular, we have to thank Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for hosting these historic talks. And talks that went very, very well. Steve was there, Steve Witkoff was there, and Michael was there, Michael Waltz and others, and they really went well. It's a big step. We got to get that war over with. You have to see the people that are dying. I look at the pictures, the satellite pictures of the field. It's a level field, and it looks like a modern day version of Gettysburg, and you know what that means. It is just carnage. It's horrible. And, it's not American soldiers. It's not even soldiers from the Middle East in the case of Ukraine, Russia.
That is worth a bit more of a mention. Talk about Australia. We had the so-called Great Emu War. I guess we were trying to cull emus. It's basically like a meme. It's made out like we had a war against the emus and we lost. The emus won. But really, we were just trying to cull.
It's called history, Chris.
Well, it's not like, the top general emu, would just have the superior military planning and defeated us or whatever. But
I think they were able to outmaneuver, out-strategize, and kick the shit out of you guys.
really, our heart just wasn't in it. We're just like, look, these animals, they are Australia, and we just didn't have the heart to wipe them out. I think that's what happened. I haven't looked into it, but yeah.
Russia, but it's people, it's young people from Russia and Ukraine mostly that are just being decimated. It's flat fields, and a bullet goes, and a bullet only stops when it hits somebody. And the level of people being killed in that battle, soldiers, young soldiers, in some cases old soldiers, because they're running out of people. They're running out of soldiers, in one case. But think of it, a modestly successful comedian, President Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that basically couldn't be won.
I think I heard the crowd
That
whinging.
never had to start and never would have.
The crowd was whinging over that.
Oh, yeah, I'd say Zelensky was probably whinging too. A lot of people whinging about that one.
Started if I was president, not even a chance. And it didn't start for 4 years, never would have started. But a war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. They'll never settle that war without our involvement. That's why they
We
did
say
such a
prawn,
great
by
job
the
this
way.
weekend. That's why Saudi Arabia did.
Paul Hogan on that commercial, he did that, come to Australia, we'll put another shrimp on the barbie. I saw a video of him. It's like, people always ask me, why'd you say shrimp? It's like, because the ad was for Americans. So they told me to say shrimp instead of prawn. Anyway. But that is the thing. We don't actually say put another shrimp on the barbie. We say put a prawn on the barbie. Even though I guess technically they might be two different things, maybe. But there is some kind of, I don't know. We just don't. We say prawn on the barbie. Anyway.
I enjoyed the history lesson of the emus better, I'll be honest with you, Chris.
Well, it is a better story, And it just feeds all these kind of bands, Stuff emu. It was the emu. It's either the emu or the ostrich, where they'll mate, and the man will stay on the eggs while the woman goes off to have sex with some other emu. I think it's emus, or it might be ostriches. That's just another fact, That's another reason why we probably decided they needed to go. But anyway.
We did such a great job this weekend in hosting. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed. They get their money back. It's a form of a loan. Nobody knows that. I know that. I said, why isn't somebody saying, we do it the same way? And we spent much more money. We have to equalize. But while the United States...
I actually had to look at one of these comments because I'm like, hang on. I'm Australian. I don't know Kurt Lazarus. I had to look it up. And of course, it's Robert Downey Jr.'s blackface Australian character from Tropic Thunder. So thanks for that, Jason. Appreciate that.
States gets nothing back, so they get their money back. It's a loan. We just give our money. And we had a deal based on rare earth and things, but they broke that deal. But they broke it 2 days ago. We had a deal because I said, we're spending $350 billion, and Europe gets their money back in the form of a loan, and we don't. We're just giving the money hand over fist. That's the Biden administration for you. But they're no longer dealing with the same United States as they were dealing with a few months ago. Why didn't crooked Joe Biden demand equalization?
I was going to say something.
And that
they
this
kind of
war
slander
is
against
far
my
more
people. That's not
important
how it works
to
in
Europe
the UK.
than it is to us, and that there's a very big, beautiful ocean, a separation. This is, we're helping Europe. We're trying to help Europe. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money that we sent them is missing. They don't know where the money is. He said, well, we don't know where half of it is. That's great, wonderful.
He did have an interview on Piers Morgan, and apparently, because I've heard Piers saying, Zelensky explained what he meant by that comment. But I don't think I actually saw the interview, so I'm not sure what Zelensky's explanation for not having all the money that's been received is. I can't imagine there's a super legitimate explanation, but
He refuses to have elections. It's low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. Every city is being demolished. They look like a demolition site, every single one of them. And the only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle. He played him like a fiddle. That's an expression we use, Yasser, to say that he's pretty easy. Pretty easy.
Yeah, explain the
A
cultural
dictator without
significance
elections.
of playing like a fiddle to a
Zelensky
Saudi
better move
Arabian.
fast, or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast, because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something I'll admit that only Trump is going to be able to do in the Trump administration. We're going to be able to
It's
do
not like
it.
he's just reading his
I think
tweet or
Putin
his
even
Truth Social
admitted
we
that.
played before.
Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably maybe he wants to keep the gravy train going. I don't know what's the problem, but he hasn't been able. He's very upset that he wasn't invited. He could have come if he wanted to, but that he wasn't invited to Saudi Arabia. But he's been working for 3 years. There's never been even meetings or phone calls to stop this.
You just see how this is annoying people. Like, he's like, Putin definitely wants peace. He wants to end the war, blah, blah, blah. Zelensky, on the other hand, I don't know. Maybe he just wants to keep the gravy train going. Maybe he wants to. I think it's part of Trump's style. Like, he's. Actually, I'll find a tweet later. There's a tweet from Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy. I don't know if he was good when Trump was first running, explaining Trump's persuasion style. And if I remember, I'll bring up a tweet where he sort of explained, to deal with Russia, you sort of flatter Putin as much as you can, and this, that, and the other. With Zelensky, you sort of have to be more hardball because, they're in a different position, and it doesn't make sense to treat Ukraine and Russia sort of evenly with the same kind of standard. But yeah, I think this is all part of it, just saying, maybe Zelensky just wants to keep the war going, keep the gravy train going, keep people dying, keep his country being destroyed because maybe it's beneficial to him somehow. I mean, that's a pretty rough thing to say. I mean, it's possible. I mean, who knows? But yeah, he's basically put it in the context of like, well, he won't sign the agreement with us to fund us, but he wants to keep taking the money and weapons.
This war, it's a horrible thing. I figure Russia's lost 900,000 soldiers. I think that Ukraine's lost probably 700,000. And it's a terrible thing. You'll see bodies and body parts all over the field, all over. We see them very accurately through satellites. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions of people have unnecessarily died. And you can't bring a war to an end if you don't talk to both sides. You got to talk. They haven't been talking for 3 years. So we hope to see a ceasefire soon and to reestablish stability in Europe and the Middle East. Thank you very much. And as I've said before, it's my hope that my greatest legacy will be as a peacemaker and a unifier. That would be a great legacy. So in conclusion, the golden age of America is upon us, and I'm inviting everyone here today and every citizen across our land to take part in the most extraordinary period of peace, prosperity, growth, innovation.
Another comment here near the end. He said something we touched on in the last episode about trying to like reduce nukes or reduce weapons in some kind of deal with Russia and China, which is sort of an idealistic sort of thing that I can get behind. It reminds me when I was young. Okay, I was watching Superman 4. All right, I was 10 or something. And there's that scene, I don't know if you've seen it. It's probably, I haven't seen it in a while, maybe it's a bit of a cheesy movie or whatever, but it's classic to me from my memory when I was 10 years old or whatever. Superman, he goes to the UN, and I remember he's like chastising all the other leaders. Like, you've all failed, you should have like got rid of nukes or something, but it's up to me. So there's Superman, he goes to all the missile sites,
that
and
was
like,
the
throws them into the sun or something.
He grabs all the nukes and then flies them to the sun.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
They made, and we didn't even realize it as kids, but they were making this political statement. And when you think about how effective those things are, I was thinking about that. Growing up, I remember watching Captain Planet. And Captain Planet's going around and stopping all of these corporations from, polluting this and that. And you're like, why would they do that? And you don't even realize that you're being programmed, and how effective that is in little kids' minds, and how that shapes the way that, like, it's been so. It's so much worse now. It's much more even overt, and it's just inculcated in all of our media now. But it's crazy to think about that. I did want to. I was while we were listening to that, I was looking at one of these things where where Zelensky was basically saying, I didn't know where half of the funding went and blah, blah, blah. Basically what he was referring to, and don't get me wrong, I still think there's lots of money missing. I think we have zero accountability about that. But, PolitiFact, you can take this for what it's worth, but they almost tell the truth in their own lie, or expose what's going on with some portion of truth, trying to defend these things. But I said, much of the money of the U.S. is dedicated for Ukraine aid is spent in the U.S. on domestic weapons manufacturers and the U.S. military and government operations. So, this is another thing that's being, that's wool being pulled over our eyes, where we're like, oh, all this money is going to Ukraine to help them. When in reality, all we're doing is reallocating money to, again, government corporations, military operations. It's going to end up going into other, and that's what's going on. Like, you get these things like this where money is going to Raytheon, money is going through General Dynamics and all these other defense contractors. And then what are they doing? Now they're contributing millions of dollars to super PACs for the Democrats or whoever is supporting their shit at the time. Like back in the early 2000s, definitely a lot of that money was going to Republicans, going to George Bush, going to, all of those things. Anybody that's supporting those people, that's how that money is circulated, laundered, and then put back into the political system, and it's getting a lot of people rich. So he's probably right in the fact that he doesn't know where half that money is, because it's not even going to Ukraine. We're taking that money, we're saying it's for Ukraine, but we're actually just paying our own corporations. And then on top of that, there's billions of dollars that went into Ukraine, and Ukraine is so corrupt. It always has been. It's been known forever. It hasn't changed. It's not like suddenly Ukraine stopped being corrupt. They're still corrupt, and everybody's padding their own pockets while they're sending their people out there to go fight a war they can't win and all die.
Yeah, they get heaps of money from Europe, and I guess they get the equipment from America. There is just a thing here from that Waltz. He sort of talks about giving them stockpiles, old stockpiles, and then spending money to replace the American ones or something.
That have gone to Ukraine have been part of a drawdown of
Am I sharing this? Yeah.
Yep.
authority, where we've literally taken them out of our stocks and then eventually through appropriations started buying them again to refill our stocks. I'll just state that there has been a lag in a lot of that process. So many of our stocks, as we look at our operations around the world, are becoming more depleted. That's one of the reasons many people have had a lot of concern about, when does this end? How much is it going to take? How many lives will be lost? How much will we spend? As a member of Congress, we repeatedly asked the Biden administration those questions, and we never got a satisfactory answer. Look, President Trump is obviously very frustrated right now with President Zelensky. The fact that he hasn't come to the table, that he hasn't been willing to take this opportunity that we have offered. I think he eventually will get to that point, and I hope so very quickly. But President Trump, as we made clear to our Russian counterparts, and I want to make clear today, he's focused on stopping the fighting and moving forward. And we could argue all day long about what's happened in the past.
Reagan.
Yeah. But I'll get back to Trump talking about getting rid of nukes. Otherwise I would have wasted my build-up story of this reminded me of my childhood when Superman got rid of a whole bunch of nukes.
While you were reminiscing of the nostalgia of nuclear
disarmament propaganda,
yeah.
which is good propaganda. I don't mind that. Captain Planet was a bit different because you had the guy who made. I haven't seen it in ages. I have to watch it again to see how it holds up now. But I remember. Yeah, a guy who was using diesel in his car was like the most evil person ever, and he's like laughing about how the trees, forget what it was, but it was so comical of like the polluters were like the most evil people in the world.
Yeah.
Like demons, basically. But anyway, back to the good stuff of getting rid of the nukes, at least some of them.
I would tell you, I was dealing with President Putin very successfully on denuclearization. We were talking about it very seriously. And then COVID came and lots of things came, and we had also talked to China about it. Now, Russia and us have the biggest nuclear by far. China is not close, but they will be close. In 3 or 4 years or 5 years, they'll be equal. But we were going to talk to China, and I spoke to President Xi about it very successfully. I think we were going to denuclearize it. We would have had to get the smaller nuclear powers, of which there are 4, 3 maybe, but 4 probably, to do something. We would have been able to do that. But I was having very strong talks with President Putin about denuclearization. And, you know, if you're president, you get presentations about what we're building, what we're having, the power of weapons, the power of many things besides weapons per se. What I saw, the power of nuclear weapons, and we can never let that happen. If that happens, the ball game will be, the world will be destroyed. The power is so enormous. You look at Hiroshima, you look at Nagasaki, multiply that times 500 times, and the world would be destroyed. So you want somebody as your president, or you want somebody as your leader that understands that we just can't let that happen. We can't let other countries get nuclear weapons. Not only Iran. Iran is a good example and maybe the one that people think about, but we can't let that happen. The power of weaponry today is so enormous that the world would disintegrate. So we can't let it happen.
Yeah, it's kind of giving this kind of
Secretary,
I won't blame
honorable delegates.
Chris, I want to address this. There's so much money involved, just like the pharmaceutical companies. I don't know if you'll ever get rid of all the corruption. That's correct, JJ. I don't think we will ever get rid of all corruption, just like that we won't ever get rid of all crime as it gets crushed by the algorithm. That's the main problem. They will.
The Soviets think they're going to like just test a nuclear
and then flinging them into the sun. Yeah.
From that last speech we were looking at with Trump, there was a bit where he talks about DOGE and perhaps giving 20% back to the American people. Have you heard that one? 20% of what they save from the DOGE cuts, they're thinking about, like, I mean, I don't know how serious it is. Probably not serious at all, but, you know, giving that to the American people like a deposit in their check or whatever, in their bank account. Did you hear him say that?
I
That's
do.
a pretty amazing thing to say.
I did see something on that.
45.
So that's 2 trillion times, what'd you say, 20%?
Yeah.
Equals, that ends up being 400 billion divided by, what we got? Let's say 300 million here in the U.S. Oh God, my phone's stupid.
That'd be
Stop it.
quite a bit, eh?
No, it's not going to be very much at all. You're going to get 80 cents. 300 million equals, you know what? Everybody will get a check for $1,300 thereabouts. It's more than I thought it would.
Okay.
I'll take that.
Yeah. And that's more than, and there should be more that they'll get, you think?
What's that?
And I imagine they might get more.
Well, I'll tell you that is a hell of a way to incentivize these, you know, fraud, waste, and abuse cutting programs where everybody will definitely vote for it. You send out checks for $1,300 to everybody in the U.S., and you know, it's people will suddenly be all about it. They'll demand a new audit every single year.
Yeah, I'm liking how they're talking about auditing the Fed and the Pentagon, which, I don't know, I almost don't believe it's going to happen. Just because they seem that's too big. Like, DOGE might be good at sort of cutting a few things here and there, but coming at sort of the heart of the beast in the Pentagon and the Federal Reserve, I'm not sure that's going to happen. I hope it does, but I don't know. I got a feeling the system's it's too foundational, that kind of stuff to the system. But we'll see. Trying to think. I suppose I could show a little bit of that 20%. Where are we? I think
Great story, MAGA.
So I will tell you that.
How do Biden? How much time was he in the office? He spent his time at the beach, and the rest of the time he was sitting there drooling over himself, signing bills. He didn't even know he was signing an executive order. So go pound sand.
Yeah, it's like just before Biden goes, he decides to let Ukraine shoot further into Russia or whatever. I mean, how was that even his decision? He was barely even holding it together.
He didn't know he was making the decision. And on top of that, he pardoned freaking like 3,000 people, something silly.
Yeah, some pretty nasty people too.
Yeah.
Not just people hanging out in the People's Building at the Capitol. You know, we're talking about real crimes.
Yeah. And a judge that was freaking prosecuting kids and putting them in jail for money that didn't even commit crimes. I mean, there's just a whole, everything from pedophiles to you name it. Never mind the fact that he pardoned his freaking junkie son.
Yeah, I think he mentions here 20% to the American people and another 20% to knock down the debt. Something like that. But it's like he's just sort of
not too many.
It doesn't sound like it's set in stone.
Somebody's getting banned.
Many of them, which is now really.
Hey,
Let me ban this jackhole. Oh, why can't I ban this person?
well, we don't mind. Well, I don't know what else he's been saying, but
Well, now they're
don't
just
mind a
spam.
little bit of TDS.
I don't mind that, but
moderation.
now he's just copy and pasting the same thing over and over and over. What is going on?
Look, I think they're good value. We prop up Trump by comparing him to Biden. Well, it's not our fault. He looks better when compared to Biden.
Yeah, well, let's do this fairly. Were you on live podcast, talking about how terrible Biden was during that time? So why don't you critique evenly? How about that?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Play it.
really waging war on government waste, fraud, and abuse, and they're curbing inflation and saving taxpayers billions and billions of dollars every single day. And there's even under consideration a new concept where we give 20% of the DOGE savings to American citizens and 20% goes to paying down debt, because the numbers are incredible, Elon. So many billions of dollars, billions, hundreds of billions, and we're thinking about giving 20% back to the American citizens and 20% down to pay back debt and pay down debt, which is, if you look at value, if it were a real estate balance sheet, the debt is tiny, but we still want to pay it down. Doesn't matter. We don't look at it as a piece of real estate. It's America. We're going to get it down through intelligence, hard work, and as Elon said, a word called caring. You have to care. By doing this, Americans will tell us where there's waste. They'll be reporting it themselves. They participate in the process of saving money. So many of the men and women in this room, as an example, they pay tremendous amounts of taxes. And here are just a few examples of where your money was going before I came along. These are just some of the, just taken at random. There are much worse examples than this. I was just looking at them before the speech, and I can tell you they were much worse.
I'm pretty sure he repeats the $50 million or $100 million in condoms for Hamas, which I'm pretty sure it turned out to be not to be true. Because people were saying at the start, no, it wasn't for Gaza. Next to Israel, it's like Gaza. It's a province in Mozambique in Africa, and it's for AIDS prevention or something, which makes a bit more sense. And Elon Musk was asked about that, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we might get it wrong sometimes." Well, that's kind of a big thing. But yeah, I think Trump repeats the Hamas thing, which makes me think, maybe we'd need to double check some of these numbers. But there's no doubt there's lots of waste going on.
And there are some that are horrible, but I don't want to really say them because they're very, very embarrassing to people. Very, very embarrassing. And they're really something, but you'll be seeing it and you will be reading about it. But just some taken at random: $2 million for sex change operations in Guatemala, $20 million for Sesame Street performances in Iraq. $20 million, that's a lot of money. I know what it costs to do those things. You get a cast over for $50,000, give them a couple of bucks tip, and that's it. Not 20 million. 20 million, that's Gone with the Wind on steroids. $101 million for 29 diversity, equity, and inclusion contracts at the Department of Education. Wow. And we've canceled all of these, saved all of this money. And again, this is just a small sample. This could go on. I could read them all day. $520 million for a consultant. I want to know who is that consultant? To do ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance investments in Africa. $25 million to promote biodiversity conservation and illicit livelihoods by developing socially responsible behavior in Colombia. $40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that even means. None of this stuff, everyone's trying to figure out what the hell does it all mean?
Anyway, it goes on for a while, listing a whole bunch of stupid spending that goes on.
A sedentary migrant. If you're not migrating, are you? A sedentary nomad.
Yeah.
A nomad that goes nowhere. Oh, man.
I think this was the meeting. This is going back a few days now, but this is the meeting between Vance and Rubio and Zelensky and his crew.
I love this guy.
Okay.
And just, people have read a bit into the body language here. There's that Kellogg, Zelensky, and one of these guys is his foreign minister, I think. Or defense minister. I'm not sure, but Ukraine, they're obviously not too happy. And they basically haven't gotten any happier since then.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're, of course, happy to welcome the Ukrainian delegation led by President Zelensky. We had a number of fruitful conversations, a number of things for us to follow up and work on. And fundamentally, the goal is, as President Trump outlined it, we want the war to come to a close. We want the killing to stop, but we want to achieve a durable, lasting peace, not the kind of peace that's going to have Eastern Europe in conflict just a couple years down the road. So we had a number of good conversations about how we might accomplish that together. And certainly we'll have many more in the days, weeks, and months to come. President Zelensky.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Very briefly, I think Vice President said everything absolutely correct. We are very thankful for American support. President Trump, we have good conversation today. Our first meeting, not last, I'm sure. And really what we need to speak more, to work more, and to prepare the plan how to stop Putin and finish the war. We want peace very much, but we need real security guarantees, and we will continue our meetings and our work, and we will be very happy to see General Kellogg also in Ukraine in this closest time. Thank you, Vice President, for meeting. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much.
So he probably should have kept that tone, but then he's been speaking a lot more since then, and he. I don't know whether he didn't sign the deal. I think it was before this. But, he's talking about Trump, falling for Russian disinformation and a few other things. And so this is a follow-up just recently with Vance.
So you said yesterday, made a lot of news, bad-mouthing Trump, not a good idea for Zelensky.
Of course
what's the thought process here?
Well, look, I mean, President Zelensky, his country wouldn't exist without the generosity of the United States of America. So say thank you. And if you disagree with the president, pick up the phone and call him or call one of our great diplomats. Don't go on a media tour around Europe bad-mouthing the president of the United States. It's insulting. It's insulting to him. It's insulting to me. It's insulting to the American people. And by the way, it's stupid. All of us who know the president would tell you that bad-mouthing him in public is not the way to get President Trump to change his mind. So I think Zelensky needs to have some better consultants.
So you said yesterday, made a lot of news.
Yeah, pretty good point, I think. There's Walt saying something about it.
Ending is focused on is ending the fighting, going to a ceasefire, and having a broader agreement. That started with his call with President Putin last week. He immediately had a call with President Zelensky. They have a term for this in diplomacy called shuttle diplomacy. I don't think anyone should be really, criticizing the president for trying to drive this to a diplomatic solution. And what he said yesterday and today is, why hasn't President Zelensky tried to end this war war for the betterment of his country. And we have to ask ourselves, is Ukraine's position improving or not on the battlefield? And then thirdly, from the European perspective, I just got off the phone with my counterparts from the United Kingdom, from France, from Germany, and said, look, we welcome Europe stepping in and offering security guarantees. We welcome Europe. We've been asking for years for Europe to step up and contribute more to not only their own defense, but Ukraine's defense. All of that is now happening, and that's because President Trump is driving this very quickly. Some people may not like the order that it's happening, but you have to talk to both sides to get both sides to the table. And that's what we're doing. That's what we did last week and just a few days ago in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I think I've got one more good little clip from Jeffrey Sachs, who I like.
Even recognize Europe. Why should they be at the Trump doesn't even recognize Europe. Why should they be at the negotiating table? Partly because Europe should have been negotiating, but it said, no, we will never negotiate until this moment.
But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years.
Now the Europeans and Zelensky are saying, oh my God, oh my God.
So we shouldn't follow what the US was doing as Europeans? This is basically what you are saying?
Of course, Europe should have a foreign policy, but they thought naively they could follow Biden. And I did tell them repeatedly, you don't let the United States blow up the pipeline that provides the energy for Europe and then sit there like a dumb idiot. We don't know who did it. Well, I can show you the president of the United States saying, if Russia invades, Nord Stream will be finished.
There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
Is that a clue? This is not foreign policy.
I remember that was funny at the time because when Biden said we'll bring an end to it, I was thinking, well, how's it up to you? This is between Russia and Germany. I didn't even really think, oh, well, you could just blow it up, I suppose.
All the options are on the table. Let me address a couple comments that Chuck's saying over here. Number one, Chuck, half my instructors are CBP. I can tell you they were absolutely miserable under the Biden administration. They completely, everyone that I've talked to so far has been supporting everything that they've been doing under the Trump administration. I'm sure there's some quibbling, but I can tell you that you can ask just about every CBP guy out there that I know, and you would ask them, hey, would you rather Trump in office or would you rather to go back to the status quo of what they were doing under Biden? And I guarantee you 9 out of 10, 90% of them, there's always going to be some holdovers because, they're political is what it is. But 9 out of 10 CBP are definitely going to support Trump over Biden. The other thing you said is Putin a dictator. Yes, he's absolutely a dictator, but he's also the difference between him and a lot of other folks is the fact that, Russia is a superpower. It's not our job to hold back Russia from Ukraine. And that's how I feel about it. The Europe can deal with them. We don't need to be supporting this. And the other part of this, the real big problem that I have with this entire thing with Ukraine, and I think most Americans do too, is that the Biden administration intentionally provoked this war. So that's the biggest problem that I have with this. And I don't care at this point. I don't want to see money going over there. Let's take care of the United States first. We should be at the White House. We should be in D.C. freaking protesting the fact that Maui hasn't been rebuilt, that we haven't seen East Palestine taken care of. We have no idea what's going on with those folks over there. I mean, the land, the water is completely freaking polluted. God knows the long-term effects of what's going on there. We have done nothing in any real we put no real money or effort. I mean, Biden didn't go there I don't think he ever went there, but I know Trump was on the ground. Maybe he went there at the very end or something like that. And then we have the Carolinas that haven't been taken care of. And now we have the Palisade fires. So that's where we're at on that. Putin is definitely a dictator. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't want to live in Russia with that kind of government and leadership or whatever, but that's not really my issue, not really my problem. Yeah. And yeah, for me, like I've been following the Ukraine war since 2014 and it just seemed kind of crazy because at the start it was basically, I mean, yes, Russia did annex Crimea. They did send, there were separatists that came from Russia to sort of fight against Ukraine. but Ukraine were just getting away with slaughtering their own people, and they've been painted as good guys for years while they did it. And yeah, the whole thing is just kind of outrageous. And it was almost like they were trying to provoke Russia to invade. And I think even back then, Russia's like, look, we have to do something. We have to sort of invade. They keep sort of killing people we consider sort of Russians in the east of Ukraine and getting closer to our border. And it's a very hostile government, this, that, and the other. We've got to probably do something. But we know as soon as we invade, we're going to suffer all the sanctions and the stuff that they did get in 22. In my personal opinion, I don't have any evidence for this, but I think Russia spent many years sort of doing what they could with their economy so they could withstand sanctions, whether they could,
agreed.
Survive on their own sort of domestic products and rely less on imports. I think they took maybe 8 years to get ready to finally respond. But I think trying to get Russia to respond was the intention right from the start. Just so America could say, oh, look, Russia's invaded poor old innocent Ukraine that was just sitting there doing nothing besides bombing the East Ukrainians without any mercy.
Well, the other part of the Ukraine, and I already touched on this earlier with our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's like, what's the intent? Like, what is success? Like, we're not. It's not like we're giving them enough to win a war. All we're doing is giving them enough to sustain a war, and that again is engineered. That's by design, folks. Like, the U.S. doesn't want Ukraine to win a war against Russia. First of all, I find that impossible. Logistically, monetarily, economically, militarily, that's impossible. So what are we going to do? We're just going to continue to funnel money out of the United States back into U.S. corporations that build weapons, and then maybe eventually even to where it escalates to the point to where now we're putting troops in Ukraine. But the point is we don't have a clear vision. The government doesn't even think they owe the American people that they're spending our money and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. We've seen nothing. All we know is that we're sending more $1 billion package here, $1 billion package there going to Ukraine with no end state in sight. Never once, not one single political leader has given us an end state. Like, what defines success? Because we don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure as soon as Russia invaded, I think I just jumped on my little Facebook or whatever and just put out a little rant, as I sometimes do, and basically said, look, Ukraine can't win. The best thing they can do now is surrender with the best deal possible. And all the people that are going to try and encourage Ukraine to fight as long as they can are basically disgusting, because all these people will die, and there's no victory. Ukraine aren't going to kick Russia out of Ukraine and then go on to take over Moscow and topple the government and get rid of Putin, because that's the only way to truly win the war, because otherwise you keep pushing them back out. They just keep coming back in with more men and more numbers, material. So there's no win for Ukraine.
Really, if we played this out in our mind, we did a little thought experiment, like, let's just keep going how it's going. What will end up is that Russia will eventually take over the entirety of Ukraine, and there will be millions of people dead in Ukraine. There'll be millions of people in Russia. We'll have millions of people, Russian people dead, Russian soldiers dead. But at the end of it, Russia will win, and they're just going to continue to push through. And yeah, we'll just continue to pump money over there and escalate this war to where either Russia's like, you know what? I'm tired of the military, monetary and material aid that the United States is giving our enemies, and now we're going to start attacking U.S. ships or U.S. interests or whatever else. Like, what is holding them back? Because that is where this is going to end, and we're going to end up in World War III, and everybody's over there just clapping like seals, like, oh, this is a great idea. Let's just keep doing this. Like, it's dumbfounding to me that anybody thinks this makes sense. I don't get it. And so right now, if Trump, because he's doing the right thing, he's saying, no, we're ending this now. And if we end up whatever territory in Ukraine that Russia has right now, if the ceasefire ended up, hey, you know what? Russia just keeps all that. Folks, that is a better deal than there's anything that's going to be in the future. It only gets worse from there. And only more people are going to die till eventually now we have Americans dying or Europeans dying or other people getting dragged into this war, which eventually the U.S. will get dragged in the war. It doesn't get better from here. period. So let them have what they have. I don't give a shit. End the war. Quit sending money to Ukraine. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, ideally, Ukraine could push to get some of it back, but yeah, the chances probably aren't too good. And even I think Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, said I forget exactly what he said, but he sort of made it out like that. Probably they're not too keen on that, the Russians, of giving up anything, really. They said something like, well, do you just want the lands back, or do you want us to take the Russian people out of those lands first? So he's basically saying, at least for Donetsk and Lugansk, I'm not sure about the two other regions, what the population, how they side. But Donetsk and Lugansk, a lot of them consider themselves as Russian, and they're happy to be part of Russia. So Lavrov's basically saying, at least for some spots, okay, we give you the land back. Do we need to kick the Russians out? How's that going to work? I got the sense that Russia's not going to go easy on that front. But yeah, Ukraine should just take whatever they can. Because eventually, if it keeps going, Russia will just slowly grind away and take all of Ukraine. And I'm not even sure they want, I could be wrong. Of course, some people saying not only does Russia want all of Ukraine, they want all of Europe as well, which is just crazy. I'm not even sure they want all of Ukraine. I'm pretty sure they just want sort of some kind of buffer zone there, and Ukraine not to be in NATO. I think they'll be happy with that. Donetsk and Lugansk, they've been wanting to join Russia for a decade. I've got all the footage of the referendum in my videos that I did, 8 months in Ukraine on YouTube. I'm not sure. It's definitely not going to get any better for Ukraine. So Russia should. So they should just end it, take what they can, and just learn. We should have taken the earlier deals. The deals are probably going to get worse and worse as time goes on. The battleground's moving. The front line's moving the wrong way. Has been for quite a while.
Yeah, and more people are going to continue to die every single day. Russia is going to continue to progress deeper into Ukraine. We're going to continue to send them just enough munitions and help to keep this war going for whatever reason. And while we sit here with $36 trillion in debt, it doesn't make sense. And then it's going to escalate to where other nations, and most likely the United States, has to get involved. And the next thing you know, China's getting involved, Iran's getting involved. You have all the makings of World War III right here, and everybody just sitting around and it's so obvious to anybody that isn't thinking with the idea of how can I make money, how can I capitalize on this, because that's what's taking place, both from a political standpoint and a corporation standpoint.
Yeah, and that's another part of the reason why I started making the videos. I wasn't just upset about all the innocent people that were dying, which was a big part of it, but also was this threat of nuclear war between America and Russia. Because even back then, it's this could go very badly if you got a civil war there, and basically America's funding one side and Russia's funding the other side. That's very dangerous. But I just might as well finish this.
Yep.
Jeffrey Sachs clip. It's only got a minute to go.
Policy. This is doing what the United States wants, but now you obviously can't just follow Trump.
It's crazy to me a lot, out of the 720 members of the European Parliament, which one of them, majority, they vote to continue this war and to keep sending weapons.
Now, strangely, if you ask of all the countries who ignores the UN the most, I'm sure every member of Parliament would say, oh, Russia. But you know what? Let me mention a secret to the members of Parliament. The United States is the country that ignores the UN completely. It's not even close. The United States have been engaged in 100 regime change operations since the end of World War II. 100. Russia just saw the U.S. pushing further, putting its missile systems, putting NATO enlargement, leaving the Intermediate Nuclear Force Agreement, leaving the ABM agreement. Europe wouldn't acknowledge any of those provocations because the only word you could use in Europe is unprovoked. Well, to my mind, frankly, you would say, okay, we understand you had reasons for all of this, and many of them legitimate. We have our fears. Now, how do we work this out? Because whatever happens, we're sharing this continent together.
Yeah, he's always good value, Jeffrey Sachs.
Yeah, no, that was
See what's
good.
going on. I think he might have just done a whole new hour with Tucker. I haven't watched it yet, but I imagine there'll be heaps of Ukraine talk. So if anyone wants a little homework assignment, you can go check out Jeffrey Sachs and Tucker.
Mike Walls, speaking of Tucker, Mike Walls was on Tucker, and then he just did Rogan. And if you haven't watched both those interviews, I definitely think they're worth watching. I know Chris doesn't really like Mike Benz. Did I say Mike Walls? Mike Benz.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of, not a huge fan of Mike Benz. A lot of people like him. I guess he obviously must be doing some good work, but yeah, he just seems a little bit. I don't know if I have to get into that. He just talked about a stand order on July 13 with the Trump assassination attempt, but it was like he didn't have the receipts for that, and he was either very wrong and mistaken or lying, one of the two. But anyway, when I tried to ask him about it, he just blocked me, so I don't have the best opinion of him, but yeah.
I do want to watch that.
Yeah, that could be a good one too. Yeah, because Orban's, he's always sort of been against the general European and even American plan against Russia. He's a bit more reasonable.
Yeah, and I know I saw some conversation going over in the comments where you guys were talking about what did Zelensky have on Biden, and it's very possible that he does have some blackmail, especially with his son being over there, and so there is some possibility there that, but I think the U.S. is doing what they're doing in the interest of these politicians. I don't think they need blackmail. This is the stuff now what we used to have neocons used to do these things and trick us into stupid wars. And now for whatever reason, it's switched over to the Democrats. So, now the Democrats are doing the exact same thing. And I think this is just they see this as another opportunity. It's another opportunity to grow the government. It's another opportunity to freaking do this circular spending where we're saying we're putting money over here when really over half the money is actually staying in the United States and being squandered and laundered in God knows how many different ways, and funding things that we would never want to, and then also getting, recycled back into different political organizations. So, I don't know that we even need to worry about that. I don't think that's even the real cause behind it, but I could be wrong. He could definitely have some dirt on the Biden family. I'm sure plenty of people out there do have dirt on the Biden family.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's too needed. I think it's standard. I don't know, empire. I don't know what you call it, but standard non-isolationism, I guess. Because you had the neocon wars with the Republicans and that, but then by Obama's time, you had the Ukraine thing, but before that you had the Libya humanitarian intervention because Gaddafi was about to attack those poor little jihadis somewhere in the country that America was trying to help take over the country, and they killed a few tens of thousands of people there, and it's basically been a mess. You never hear about Libya anymore. I imagine it's just almost a failed state.
This question has been posed a couple times.
It seems similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems similar kind of line, Russia bad, Ukraine good, Trump's a bit crazy. That's the kind of vibe that we get on the TV.
Get the jab. Get your monthly jab.
Yeah.
Are they still pushing COVID vaccines over there hard?
No, I haven't heard from it for a while. I resisted. And I thought it was like, I knew I was in the minority.
So that's why you're in prison. Now we know.
Yeah.
I bet something in the single percentages in your country have not had a COVID vaccine.
I think it's something like that. Hang on, bear with me. Because I asked ChatGPT before when we were talking about it in the group chat.
That was there in 2020 or 2021 at the height of everything. And man, you guys loved some jabs, and you had to show your little thing to get in every freaking restaurant and all of that stuff.
That's crazy.
Matt, you're talking about the other 60% of where DOGE money is going. I've been told it's going back into other government programs, and I don't know how much information is on that, but that has been addressed or talked about at least. I don't. I don't know exactly.
All right, so you want to guess? You're right about the single percent. What percent do you think didn't get it?
I want to say 3%.
5. Close.
5.
But I'm one of the 5. Okay, you're talking about the elite of Australia, right here.
That's right.
Top
5
5%.
out of 100.
Yeah, so I had to stay in for a little while. Oh, I think I snuck into the pub a couple of times, but yeah, they kept telling us, you can't just wait it out. You think you'll just be able to wait it out and then we'll open the shops again for you. It won't be happening. This is one of our premiers down in Victoria, I think. Oh, I saw it as a challenge. No, I can wait it out. You can't keep this up forever. And yeah, I won. The government lost. I fought the government and the government lost. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, I don't know if we want to play too much more. We're sort of coming up to about 2 hours.
Now, USAID is going to be disbanded as it pretty much is. It's going to be down to nothing. But again, one of the concerns is like somebody else stated on this. I think it was Matt Kay that talked about what's going to happen here in 4 years. And again, my hope is that we see such radical change in a positive way that a majority of Americans wake up. And I think that's what did take place this last election. I think there was even a lot of people that ended up voting for Biden just because they're blue no matter who, but there's been even articles written on this. People in New York were actually secretly happy that Donald Trump actually won. So I think we're seeing a political revolution here in the United States and an awakening. I think people are just fed up. The left just pushed too far with all the woke stuff, with all the trans stuff, with all this intervention stuff all over. And then, and then as DOGE and the Trump administration continue to expose all the different corrupt things that we were doing overseas and are doing within our own government in the way that we're wasting money, and we can watch it. We're watching what takes place in California, where they're spending billions of dollars on all kinds of different things, but yet they don't even have their water reservoirs filled prior to fire season. And now we have fire hydrants that are empty when houses are on fire. So there's been huge.
Did you see the mayor? She was recently complaining that no one in her team told her that there was bad weather on the way before she left for Africa or something. But I'm pretty sure she could have checked that herself. Because I think there was signs like that.
Well, they have
conditions were there for fire
every single year prior. During the Santa Ana winds, it happens every single year. She should have known. This is just another leader not taking responsibility and trying to pass the buck when they shouldn't. And hopefully, Californians are going to wake up. I mean, my God, I don't know what else it's going to take before California changes. I don't know. It's just going to continue to get worse if they don't start voting differently.
Also, I need to defend the sippy cup, all right? The sippy cup is the elite, okay? It's practical. It's got the elite Australian aluminium. All right. Keeps it nice and ice cold. You can still hear the ice. Still full of ice after hours. And I just, I pour it in this thing. This is like elite technology, all right?
Yeah.
When this stuff comes to America, you guys are going to love it, all right? This technology.
We showed you guys how to do it. You guys didn't even know you had aluminium. So we're like, hey, you guys know about aluminum? Like, no, but we know about aluminium.
Never heard of such a thing.
Oh. I am so sick about this cutting the foreign aid crap off. We had no money to look at the deficit we're brought. Oh, yeah, about everybody whining about. Well, USAID doesn't really do a lot of aid to begin with. It's the U.S. Agency for International Development. Aid is not what they actually do. They do a lot of things under the guise of aid. But again, I think a lot of this stuff is going to continue to get exposed. But the Democrats are, what'd you call it? Whinging?
Yes. With an H and a G, I think. Yep.
Discretionary spending.
WHIN.
Nobody cares how it's spelled, Chris. So there's that.
They do.
Yeah, I mean, discretionary spending. We've always had discretionary spending. Hopefully, they'll use some discretion while they're spending it in this administration. The discretionary spending. What I think is always funny is when they point to like how large stuff is, and they point to the small sliver of discretionary spending compared to the rest of the actual budget. There's a lot of intellectual dishonesty going on with that. I often see that pointed out. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, discretionary spending will again be utilized with some discretion during this administration. Yeah. Well, folks, I think we will wrap it up right there. But I appreciate this was a great conversation, guys. I think you guys kept it going over there in the comments, and that's what this is supposed to be. Chris and I obviously have full-time jobs, and we don't have a lot of time to always prep and do all these things and come up with a lot of content for you. But that's the intent of this, is for it to be a discussion where you guys are participating. And I think tonight, you guys did a really good job tonight. You kept the conversation going, and yeah, we appreciate it. I think that's what makes this fun. When we're
there's
just
a little bit of Oh, you go.
No, I was just saying, when we're just sitting here talking and putting up videos, to me, it's not as fun. I like when we get in here and start talking smack over here in the comments. Jeff is always good for some nonsense.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, this must be, maybe there's a color thing going on. This is like red, okay? This isn't pink.
It does have looks like neon pink.
That's must be my color settings. It's like totally like blood red. It's anything else is an illusion.
It's a real feminine red if it's red.
Yeah, well, in my defense, I didn't actually buy it, but it is good, so I use it. Right?
Damn it. Shanja also said it's salmon. So, I mean, there you go. There it is. All right, folks. Well, listen, we really appreciate you tuning in, and a lot of fun tonight. So you guys keep your eyes out. And who knows what we'll have for you coming Tuesday.
I just noticed salmon was a color. Very informative show.
Yeah, it's don't start adding extra freaking syllables to it just because you're in Australia.
I think you guys chopped them off. I think that's how that works.
Here in Australia. Anyways. All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, go buy all your stuff from ParamountTactical.com. Definitely got a bunch of other stuff coming out. We'll be getting the training schedule out hopefully this week. I'm waiting for some answers on some stuff. But anyways, until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.